We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land of which we record this podcast, the Whadjuk people of Noongar. We recognise their continued connection to the land and waters of this beautiful place and acknowledge that this land has never been ceded.
Step into the realm of daring ideas and transformative dialogues. This is Voices from the Edge, the podcast that pushes boundaries and ventures beyond the ordinary. Here, we confront the crucial issues that shape our world today. From the heartbeat of community challenges to the untold chronicles of leadership. From the relentless pursuit of social justice to the essential lessons in safety and lifelong learning. Voices from the Edge takes you to the crossroads of change. Because the edge is not just a boundary, it's where growth happens. It's where the real conversations begin. So lean in, be inspired, and let's explore what lies beyond the edge.
And joining us today is the marvellous Shamichael Hallman. Shamichael, how are you?
Shamichael Hallman is an internationally recognized author, speaker, and civic innovator. As Director of Civic Health and Economic Opportunity at the Urban Libraries Council, he champions public libraries as engines of democracy, equity, and connection. A former Loeb Fellow at Harvard University, Shamichael's work has been featured in Smithsonian Magazine, TVO Today, and American Libraries Magazine. His book, Meet Me at the Library, explores how libraries can help us heal, engage, and reimagine our shared future.
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Tom.
Where are you joining us from today?
I am joining you from Rockville, Maryland, which is a little bit outside of Washington, D.C.
Okay. And what's the weather been like in D.C. in the last couple of days?
Oh, gosh, it has been very hot and muggy, humid, you know, like typical like August weather. August in DC can be, people kind of wind things down a little bit because it gets so hot and muggy. But you kind of come to expect it.
Excellent, excellent. Now, Shamichael, I've asked you to come on because you spent most of your life advocating for public spaces, particularly libraries, and libraries, as we discussed off air, to me, particularly public libraries, have always been an important part of my life. When I was 5 years old, apparently you weren't supposed to get a library card until you were 12, where we were, but at 5 years old, the library gave my mum a card for me because she'd be taking 15 books home a week, and about 12 of them would be for me. And libraries for me have always been about, especially public libraries, as I said, if you cannot afford an education and if you cannot escape a situation, libraries became, I don't know, the lifeblood of it gave you an opportunity to do better. What attracted you to public libraries?
Very much your story as well, Tom. It mirrors my story. There actually wasn't a library in my little town. I grew up in a very small town in Alabama, and there wasn't a library in my hometown, but there was a library a few towns over. And very much like yourself, I found myself being drawn to the library, the many resources that were there, books and the reference materials, encyclopedias, and all the things that the library offered me. And for a long time, because I was a kind of introverted kid and very nerdy, the library was a place of refuge and solace. But eventually, I began to meet other young folks who had similar interests as me, who were also interested in planes and comics and sports. And it was that connection, actually, perhaps even more so than the resources themselves, that continued to draw me into the world of library.
Yeah. When you say the resources that are there, what what other resources were there at your little library in Alabama? Was it just books on shelves, or was there more?
Yeah, well, I as I look back on that experience now, um, I think there were a number of resources, and the first resource was just the library itself. As a public space, that it was
Mm.
this place in the community where everybody could show up, and there was no fee to walk in the door. It didn't matter if you had any money or not, right? And the number of those places in a community, often there aren't many places where you can just show up, right? But
Mm,
then when you
true.
walk in the door, there is the librarian that is there. This person that is knowledgeable, and it seemed like no matter what question you had, they didn't have the answer, but they knew where to send you to find the answer. And I think sometimes when we talk about libraries, we can forget that there are really amazing, passionate, and trained individuals who are staffing these places. And so, like, I always view the librarian as like a key resource. And then, sort of like that's the door, and then that's the person you see once you walk in. Then once you're in there, I think there are lots of things. There's space. There's space to sit down, to a quiet space to read, to comprehend, to imagine, to almost escape, right? I mean,
Yeah,
for myself, being able to pick up an encyclopedia or a magazine and not be rushed, not be hurried like I might be, say, in the supermarket, but to get that same magazine, be able to sit down and really engage in it and be sort of transported to another world. All of these things were very valuable at a time when there was no, public internet. You couldn't hop on a computer. This was the late '80s, early '90s in the United States, and the internet wasn't really a thing in terms of its access to people. And so, but the computer was, right. And so, even being able to go and practice your typing skills, right, or to play, a very simple game was something that was also very, very lovely for
yeah, yeah. I when I was there, the to me it was when you said about the escape. That was literally for me refuge. Yes, absolutely. Escape to other places I've probably never been or will never be, or situations, and it gave you a little bit of inspiration or hope that there was more than outside what you currently were experiencing in life. I won't say the drudgery of life or the boredom of life, but the same, the grind. And let's be brutally honest, for some of us, it's been a grind through poverty, basically, to get stuff done. So it was actually good to see a bit of hope and to see, I know, to read and learn some greater wisdom from people a bit smarter than we might normally associate in our own communities. To me, that's what they were about. But you've written a book, Meet Me at the Library, and in it you basically say that you consider libraries vital to democracy. Can you explain that for the listeners?
Yeah. So the book for me um, really started with a job that I took in Memphis, Tennessee, with the Memphis Public Library System. I was hired there in early 2017 to uh, help give new life to a historic library in downtown Memphis, the Cossett Library. Um, and the question that we were really asking, we were sort of taking this moment for this library to sort of ask ourselves, what is a library? What could this library be? What could it be for this particular community in which it surrounded itself? And certainly we wanted to stay true to the roots, being a place that was where you could access knowledge and information, being a place where you could get online, be a place where you could, do the things you needed to do, whether that was to complete a job application or get online and find government benefits or whatever it might be. But there were also these other things that were sort of bubbling up in the U.S. We had made our way out of the 2016 election, and there was, of course, a lot of politicized rhetoric that was dividing the country, and so there was an opportunity there to think about how might a public space like the library be a place where people could come together, people from all walks of life could come together for shared experience, right? That beyond the political fray, that people could sit down and sew together, or learn a new hobby together, or engage in a book together, and find commonality, that we begin to see that these were needed things in our society, the opportunity to bring people, to connect people, to bring people together. And so, what that library ended up being in Memphis. Now, I'm no longer there, but that library is a really special place. Even as you walk to the outside of that library, there's a beautiful courtyard that has seating and shade and plantings, and you oftentimes see people just kind of out, hanging out. Some of these individuals are unhoused, some of these are corporate folks who are on a lunch break, but just kind of out, hanging out. And I think that sort of thing, the opportunity to bump into the stranger, to bump into the person that maybe is a little bit different than you, thinks a little bit different than you, that functions a little bit different than you, that is vital to democracy. And then, of course, inside the space, once you walk into the library, there are all these really cool features. There's a cafe there that has really amazing, local fairs that changes seasonally. There is a recording space where you can go and do a podcast. You can do a video project. There is a kind of a creation space where you can learn how to sew and knit and these sorts of things. And there's a performing arts space, and this space hosts all sorts of configurations. You can have a corporate gathering there. You could do an artistic performance there. And people might say, well, hey, what does that do for, like, how do you connect that to democracy? How do you connect that to the civic health of a place? And I would say that, again, shared experience is very, very important. uh, Equity and access to things is important, right? Because everyone doesn't have the ability to hop online. Everyone doesn't have that at their home. Everyone doesn't have a computer or an internet at their home. And so that sort of the library as an equalizer is very, very important in democracy. But even for folks who do have those things at home, being able to go to the library and learn a new skill is something that I think is super important. What I love about the library, even as we think about checking out a book, right? What sort of compels you to bring that book back is knowing that there's somebody else waiting on that book, right? And that it's your duty to get that book back on time, because not because you're afraid of getting a library fee, right? But because, like, no, there's somebody else that wants that knowledge. And this sort of thinking more broadly about this place is facilitating community. This place is facilitating conversation and relationship. I think those things are very vital to the everyday life and the everyday democracy of our communities.
Good, good. Now, public spaces like libraries constantly face some significant challenges. People tend to cut budgets whenever money gets tight. It's arts, it's community services, anything like that. We also have sometimes that they are underused or sometimes overused because we have so many people who want to use them. How do you challenge and try and influence public perception about the importance of libraries and public space in general?
Yeah, um, as I think particularly, and we can pull this beyond the U.S. in just a moment, but as I think about the U.S. and I think about the political sort of fallout that happened after the 2016 election, and then coming out of that, we go almost right into the pandemic, right? And we start seeing these reports in the U.S. of an epidemic of social isolation, of loneliness, and we've got these
Mm.
public health professionals who are saying the country, like, people are lonely, people are not having the sort of opportunities to be in community with each other. And so I think sort of two things emerged. Number one, I think all of us recognized in that moment the importance of parks, because while we couldn't necessarily be together indoors, lots of people were going to parks during the pandemic. It was, an outdoor space. It was fresh air. It was nature. It was greenery. And there's lots of reports that talk about just the power of outdoors and green space and what that does to the mental and social well-being. Um, but then also as we start looking even more deeply into this notion of loneliness, and I look at a report that came out in the book. I talked about this report from the U.S. Surgeon General at the time, uh, um, who was looking at this not as like an individual problem of like, hey, this person just needs to go make more friends, but looking at like how our communities are actually shaped, the availability of public space and public transit and these sorts of things. And so, what I talk about a lot right now, I mean, I come in contact with a lot of people who use the library every day, and they understand the vital role that it plays in helping them get access to information and their favorite book, and the author talk that comes to town every year. There are also people who maybe haven't gone to the library in a number of years, and they said, "Oh, man, I don't need that anymore. I mean, I've got things at home. Library is not a place where I would go." And what I tell those individuals is, yes, that may be the case for you, but there are lots of other people in your community who don't have that. And the very fact that there are well-funded, well-maintained public amenities in your community actually does a really amazing thing for your community. That the connections are tighter, the property values. Even if we want to get very sort of selfish there, even the property values are things that are enhanced when we have good public spaces. And so, um, I think in a moment when we are tempted to underfund our parks and our libraries and our community centers, that this is actually the time now that we should be doubling down on putting investments in the places that really strengthen our community.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So when we're in when we're in this situation where we've got alienation, or I don't know, it's almost like separation within our communities, investing more in getting public space and getting people working together and sharing experience together would actually be, I don't know, worth the payoff in the long term.
For sure,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, in so many ways, in the trust that we have in each other, in the trust that we have in institutions, in our ability to enhance our connections with each other, in our ability to work together with each other, right? I mean, our communities, our society is becoming increasingly diverse, right? And just the ability to have tolerance and understanding and respect of others, and to be able to work with others across difference, whether that's political or socioeconomic or religious or whatever it might be. The ability to sort of practice the art of association, our public spaces do an incredible job there. Now, and I would say that is one part of it, right, Tom? But there are other people, who do need a bit of a stronger argument, who want to see the bottom line, if you will, right? And so one of the things that I'm doing in my current role, so I work right now for an organization called the Urban Libraries Council, and we are an association of about 200 urban library systems across the U.S. and Canada. One of the tools that I'm working on right now and that I've been getting out to our library members is this tool called the Business Value Calculator. And here we're looking at the direct impact that public libraries have on aspiring entrepreneurs and business owners. And what we say is across four domains: access to space, access to research services, access to specialized equipment like maker spaces, 3D printers, heat press, these sorts of things, and then access to programs, so like how you start a business, how you get your taxes in order, how you have a creative mindset. What we say is that many of these things are happening in the public library every day, particularly in the urban library systems. And if people could not go to the library and they had to go to the private sector to get that help on how to launch, on how to develop their business plan, or they had to pay for a co-working space or a maker space, that there would be some financial exchange they would have to have here. And so the tool that we have created now asks libraries to say, hey, Talk to me about all these things that happen in your library. Talk to me about all the programs you do that help entrepreneurs. Talk to me about the specialized space that you have. Talk to me about um, your laptops and your desktops that have Microsoft Office, that have Adobe Creative Suite, these things that people can use for absolutely free. Now let's look at how many times people have used those over the course of a year. And what we're seeing, Tom, is that in many of our library systems, this is, in the US and Canada, whether we're in Toronto or New York or LA or San Francisco, whatever it may be, that millions of dollars of economic impact is being generated by the public library in service to entrepreneurs. And those folks are able to go out and launch businesses, hire employees, and really contribute to communities, right? And so, even for those people who say, "Oh, I don't need all the mushy stuff, all the relationship stuff," what we're trying to say is that that stuff is important. You need to understand that. But if that's not the place that we can get you to understand it, let's look at the very real impact that your tax dollars in supporting the public library, like what the return on investment that gives to a community. And we're finding a lot of success actually in our advocacy as we talk to local elected officials and corporations and foundations. I think people are really starting to see, oh, I didn't think about the library in that way.
Good. Now, libraries, we talk about access and inclusion for people. How do we, particularly with libraries, how do we try and get them to be more encouraging so that everyone, no matter from whatever background and no matter where they are, can feel both welcome and safe in our own libraries?
So that's really been the work. Um, that question, it's a great question, Tom, and it influenced so much of what we did in Memphis, and it influences a lot of what we do now with the Urban Libraries Council. I think that question is so dynamic because it touches on so many layers and domains. It touches on physical design, right? And first off, we have to have buildings that are beautiful, that elicit joy, that are accessible, right? Like that's very huge. I have a father that is wheelchair bound, and so is the wheelchair accessible for him? Can he get down a ramp? Can he get in the door? Can he navigate through the aisles, through the stacks, right?
Mm.
So physical design is so important, and so one of the things that I'm seeing here are architects and designers really thinking more heavily about this and saying, "Wow, okay, we recognize that there are a variety of people with a variety of abilities that are using the space. Some of these folks have different needs. How do we create spaces that can be used by everyone?" And so often, what we're seeing, particularly here in the States right now, are spaces that are very flexible and that are very dynamic. And so you might not see in some cases a library with wooden bookshelves that are, from floor to ceiling. You might see bookshelves that are more mobile now, right?
Mm.
You might see furniture that's more mobile now. Um, things that, and so I think physical design is one element. I think another element is the staffing model. Like who is a
Mm.
librarian? Who gets to be a librarian? Sort of representation is very important. People want to be able to see when they walk in a library. It's helpful to see a smiling face who mirrors a story like yours, right? That's important, and I think our collections, the books that we have on the shelves, right? I think the beauty of the library, and this is where maybe there's some pushback now in society, but I think the beauty of the library is that you should be able to walk into any public library and with any given topic, whether it's climate or the economy or race, any topic, you should be able to see a diversity of viewpoints written from a diversity of people, right?
Yep.
Like that's important, and those are like very small things that you can do to of course bring people in. And then I think as I've been traveling throughout the U.S. and Europe a little bit. And one thing that I hear from library leaders is this sort of common thread that libraries do a pretty terrible job of telling their story, right?
Mm.
And that internally as an institution, we have to get better. some of us are more introverted in nature. Some of us are not the best storytellers, but we have to get better at getting out into the community and saying these are all the things that your public library offers you, and these are the reasons why you should show up. If you are a parent with a young child, there's something for you. If you are a college student, there's something for you. If you are an aging person and you're looking to start a new hobby or maybe think about where you're going to take a vacation, the library has something for you. And so the storytelling and the way that we engage the community is equally as important.
Yeah. I think about most great societies that we've had throughout human ages, and I look at it and go, the one thing that I see they've got in common is they've always had great respect for knowledge. They've always had great repositories of knowledge. Now, admittedly, they might not have always been open to the public or only for certain groups, but there was always an emphasis given about how important a repository of knowledge is. And to me, that's what a library should be. Right from the design, I don't know how many drab, square, grey buildings I see as libraries that have basically been given by regional, let's be honest, governments, because it is a drab grey building and it was the cheapest building to build. To me, if we got the design right and made the outside even look inspirational, to me, universities, or at least some universities, have done that. You look at their buildings and you look at it in awe and you go, this is a great place of learning. This is libraries to me need to move more to that model where we look at it as the centre pillar in our community, where people want to go, to be inspired. It's just a shame that we don't get the funding for it, but I think that's one of the things we're missing. You're talking about libraries not telling the story about themselves. Well, it's usually because the staff are so busy doing everything for everyone and they're under-resourced and they're given pretty ordinary buildings.
Yeah.
In 10 to 20 years' time, looking ahead, using a crystal ball, what's your vision for libraries in the future?
Well, I do want to just sort of come back to one thing that you've talked about, and I know we've mentioned it, but I have the library as a place of beauty, as a place of inspiration and creativity and imagination. This is what the public deserves, right? This is
Yeah.
not a resource to be used by some segment of the community that maybe doesn't have access or doesn't have homes. The library should be a place for everyone, and if we truly think about it as a place for everyone, then we will design it that way. And so I wholeheartedly agree with you there. The vision for libraries, to me, the public library has always been an evolving institution. As you've said, and I agree, knowledge and information has always been at the center of that. But how people get access to that and what that looks like has been very different over the years. There was time when we didn't have computers in the library. There was time, when someone said, "Oh, hey, we should leave the library. We should get out into the community. We need a bookmobile, right? We should pack things up and take things to people." Uh, um, um, and so the vision for me in terms of a library 20 years down the road is is a place, is an organization, is an institution that is constantly scanning the community and saying, what does our community need? The example that I talked about in Memphis with the recording studios and the performing arts space, we didn't do that just because it was a trendy thing to do. We did that because Memphis is a city that is brimming with creativity. There are all sorts of artists and singers and rappers and authors and poets. It's a very it's a very creative city, and it's very much the identity of the place. And there were lots of people as we got out into the community and said, how can this library best serve you? People who said, like, who just very plainly said, hey, it would be great if I could go to a space and get access to some creative software because I can't afford to spend $200 for this software. I can't afford to spend $30 a month for this piece of technology. It would be great if the library had that. We listened to the community, and we said, and we went to our funders, and we went to local government, and we said, hey, this is what we're hearing. We believe that if we put these things here, that we could do a major service to our communities, to people maybe who don't have the ability to do so, right? And so, for me, looking ahead, I would hope, and this is kind of, I think, a little bit of my life's mission right now, is to, number one, from a library perspective, to work with library leaders to say it's so important for us to always be mindful of the community, and not just the people who are coming in the library every day, but also the people who never walk through the doors. It's very important for us to get out and talk to those individuals and to see what's happening there. And that as people come to the library, Tom, you told me your story of what the library meant to you. I told you my story of what the library meant to me. My thing is that I want librarians to tell those stories of impact, right? That if every day you know that there's somebody that's coming, like I remember, like like there's some things I'll never forget about working in the library. One of the things that I will never forget is that there was a day when there was an older black gentleman who came into the library, and he said, "Hey, I just got laid off from my job, and but I learned that there's a hotel in my neighborhood that is hiring, and I think I have the skills that I need to go and apply for a job there." But he says, I am, I think he was maybe at the time in his early 60s, maybe. And he said, I don't know how to get on a computer. They're telling me that in order to apply for this job, I've got to get online and I've got to upload a resume. And I don't have a resume. I'm just used to, I'm very old school. I'm used to going to a place and filling out a job application and the people calling me a little bit later. And we literally, Tom, I had to sit with this gentleman for about 45 minutes. We had to help him put a resume together. We had to help him get an email address because he needed an email address to actually submit his application to the place. I had to show him how to log into the email, right? I had to show him how to go to this website and upload his resume that he had completed. And like, hey, this is how you're going to have to check your email every day to make sure these people, are going to reply to, because they're going to, probably respond to you via email. And he just didn't know. Like, he had no idea. And he came back to me about a month later and said, "Hey, I got the job, and I feel much more comfortable with the computer now. I'm using the email a little bit more. I'm emailing my grandkids now." And I think that, I told that story everywhere I went in the city. I said, "This is what's happening. This is the value. This is one of the things that libraries do that you might not know of." But there's no other place that gentleman could go to get that level of service, that he could get that level of help. And so this is why, again, I say that libraries do this stuff every day, but often never tell those stories. And so it's important to tell those stories as we do the work.
Yeah, they certainly do give people the opportunity to improve their lives and their communities. All right. Shamichael, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today, but unfortunately our time has come to a close. I just want to say, honestly, I applaud your work, and it is very rare to see someone advocate for these things that are very important to us, which we tend to take for granted, particularly as we move through life and maybe through improve our conditions, and that we tend to forget the important and central part these institutions play or played in our lives. So thank you so much for your time. And I must say, could I perhaps in the future maybe get you back on just to let me know how you go?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And to your listeners, I would just encourage them to take another look at their public library, no matter where they are in the world. Now might be a really great time to go and revisit the library that's in your community.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Voices from the Edge. If you like what we are doing, like the episode in the podcast, subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes and leave a positive review.